Hey guys, today we're stepping into a prehistoric world, one where the Earth was not only ruled by strange and terrifying creatures, but one where early humans had to learn how to survive in the shadows of these giants. Imagine it, you're walking through dense, untamed forests, thick with the scent of earth and damp leaves, the ground beneath you spongy and uneven. In the distance, you hear a loud crashing sound, branches snapping, ground trembling beneath the weight of something massive. You turn and freeze, eyes wide. A herd of herbivorous dinosaurs, towering above you, brush past, oblivious to your presence. You breathe a sigh of relief, but that relief is fleeting, because not far behind them are the carnivores, sleek, hungry predators on the prowl. You probably won't survive this if you're not quick on your feet or aware of every sound around you. This is the world where you, as one of the first humans, must adapt, or perish. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And feel free to post your location and local time in the comments below, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Living in a world with dinosaurs wasn't just about avoiding extinction from these massive creatures. It was about survival, learning to thrive in an ecosystem shared by beings much larger and far more dangerous than anything we can imagine today. Dinosaurs weren't just part of the backdrop, they were a constant, looming presence in early human life, whether they were predators stalking through the underbrush or giants grazing the landscape. In this section, we'll explore what it might have really been like to coexist with dinosaurs. What did humans experience on a daily basis? How did they navigate a world full of danger and wonder, where you might stumble upon the bones of long-dead creatures one moment, and face off with living giants the next? Early humans were still figuring out how to survive, and the very idea of living in the same environment as these colossal beasts must have been mind-blowing. Let's take a closer look at how these creatures influenced early human life, both practically and psychologically. Living in a world alongside dinosaurs would have been an experience unlike anything we can comprehend today. Imagine a day in the life of an early human, waking up in a temporary shelter made from branches and animal hides, the air heavy with the earthy smells of the wilderness. You step outside, and the first thing you notice is the sound. There's a distant rumble that vibrates through the ground, almost like a heartbeat. The noise of large creatures, their massive forms moving through the forest or open plains, is constant. You can hear the rustling of trees as herbivorous dinosaurs graze, their towering figures so large they cast shadows that darken the landscape. But it's not just the gentle giants you need to worry about. In the distance, you hear the unmistakable screech of carnivorous predators, perhaps a pack of raptors, their eyes locked onto something smaller and more vulnerable. Historians still argue whether early humans encountered dinosaurs directly or whether we are merely imagining an overlap of timelines that never truly existed. Some scholars suggest that early Homo sapiens did not share the planet with dinosaurs in the traditional sense, considering the time gap between when dinosaurs went extinct and when humans first appeared. Others, however, point out that many of the creatures we think of as dinosaurs, large, reptilian creatures, might have survived until closer to the emergence of early Homo sapiens. Either way, imagining how humans would have responded to such a daunting world gives us an idea of the challenges they might have faced. But let's assume, for a moment, that humans did exist alongside creatures that could be categorized as dinosaurs. What would daily life have looked like? Well, to put it simply, it would have been an unrelenting game of survival, where everything, from food to shelter, had to be planned around these massive animals. You wouldn't just be concerned about food or predators, you'd be aware of where these giants were grazing, where they were moving, and whether they'd be in your way. The early humans who lived in such a world would have had to be incredibly alert and reactive to their environment. To say it was dangerous is an understatement. But it wasn't just the threat of being eaten that would have shaped human interactions with dinosaurs. These creatures were part of the landscape. Whether they were huge herbivores munching on plant matter, or fierce carnivores stalking the land for their next meal, dinosaurs would have been an ever-present part of daily life. Humans likely wouldn't have interacted directly with the massive creatures, but they would have constantly been aware of them. Every rustle in the trees or distant roar would signal that these giants were nearby, reminding early humans that they were living in a world that required constant vigilance. Still, not all was terrifying. Dinosaurs weren't just creatures to be feared, they were part of the ecosystem that humans needed to survive. The big herbivores might have been a source of food, providing meat that humans would have fought to secure. However, the larger predators like the apex carnivores, think of a T-Rex, for example, would have been a very real danger. The risk wasn't just from the animals themselves, it was also from their behavior, unpredictability, and the sheer difficulty in navigating the land in a way that kept you out of their territories. In a world where massive creatures roamed freely, early humans would have learned not only how to protect themselves but how to respect the environment. They wouldn't have had the luxury of moving freely without concern for these giant beasts. Instead, they would have developed intricate systems for tracking movements, understanding animal behavior, and coordinating hunting and gathering with the presence of dinosaurs in mind. Even though humans didn't have advanced tools or strategies at first, they were adaptable, and over time, they would have figured out how to live in this hostile environment, learning from the animals themselves, mimicking their strategies for survival. Historians still argue whether early humans ever directly competed with dinosaurs for food or territory. Some believe that the larger herbivores may have been a main food source for early humans, while others think that the ecosystems were so abundant that they avoided direct competition. Whatever the case, early humans likely had to find a way to balance their need for food with the danger posed by the world's largest creatures. They were learning to thrive in a hostile environment, and in many ways, the challenge of surviving alongside these giant creatures was one of the primary drivers for human innovation and cooperation. So, while the life of early humans alongside dinosaurs wasn't about constant battles for dominance, it certainly was about coexisting in a shared world where survival wasn't guaranteed. These ancient creatures, whether gigantic herbivores or terrifying predators, were a reminder that the Earth was, and still is, a wild place. Early humans had to learn how to adapt, how to work with nature, and how to respect the power of the creatures they shared the planet with. Living in the presence of these prehistoric giants wasn't just about fear or excitement, it was a constant balancing act. Early humans, who were still figuring out how to thrive in a world of unpredictable climates and scarce resources, had to be hyper-aware of the dangers posed by dinosaurs and other large creatures. The dynamics of this world were shaped by a brutal and unpredictable natural order. While they may have been able to coexist with smaller animals or hunt them for food, larger creatures like the mighty theropods, with their predatory instincts and strength, presented a real, ongoing danger. Think about it. You're out hunting for smaller game, perhaps a wild boar or some smaller mammoth, and suddenly, you hear a distant roar. Your heart races. The ground vibrates with the pounding of enormous feet, and you turn just in time to catch a glimpse of a creature far beyond your size. A predator, like a towering, carnivorous dinosaur, moving at an alarming speed. Survival instincts kick in, you know you have moments, maybe seconds, to either fight, hide, or flee. You probably won't survive this if you hesitate. These creatures weren't just part of the scenery, they were a life and death concern every single day. The presence of such massive creatures would have profoundly shaped early humans' behavior, social structures, and daily routines. For one, it meant that humans had to adapt their hunting techniques. When large predators roamed the same terrain, humans couldn't just approach a hunt without considering the bigger picture. Tracking, hunting, and even gathering had to be done with the awareness that these animals could strike at any moment. Humans likely learned to work in teams, relying on communication and shared strategy to stay safe, protect each other, and survive in a world where danger could emerge from any direction. Historians still debate whether early Homo sapiens directly competed with dinosaurs for food sources or simply avoided them. Some believe that early humans might have focused on smaller prey and scavenged leftovers from the larger creatures, avoiding direct conflict unless absolutely necessary. Others believe that early humans, driven by hunger or desperation, might have directly hunted these massive creatures. But the reality is likely somewhere in between. Humans probably focused on gathering plants and hunting smaller game while avoiding direct encounters with the more formidable, dangerous dinosaurs. This wasn't a world of constant warfare between humans and dinosaurs, rather, it was a world of calculated risk and careful navigation of the landscape. As early humans adapted, they likely found ways to protect themselves from these giant predators. Shelter became more than just a place to sleep, it became a fortress. Caves were valuable, offering not only protection from the elements but also from large carnivores. The strategic use of fire, too, would have been a critical defensive tool. Fire helped ward off predators, providing light and warmth, and perhaps even scaring off animals that could otherwise have been dangerous. Yet even with these advantages, the constant presence of these predators meant that early humans had to remain vigilant and resourceful. Every day in such a world would have been filled with risk and uncertainty. But there were also some advantages to living in the shadow of these giant creatures. Even though they posed a threat, these massive dinosaurs were also part of the natural cycle that early humans would have come to understand and rely on. When large herbivores roamed the land, they often left behind food sources that were accessible to humans. They might have trampled vegetation or left behind carcasses that humans could scavenge for meat, bones, and tools. While early humans couldn't have known it, the presence of large herbivores like sauropods would have helped shape the ecosystem in ways that benefited them. This relationship with large animals was symbiotic in many ways. Humans weren't always direct predators, they were often opportunistic scavengers, taking advantage of the work done by larger creatures. For early humans, being able to adapt their diets, take advantage of available resources, and avoid the larger predators was key to their survival. They had to learn to read the landscape, to understand when it was safe to hunt, where to gather resources, and how to avoid becoming prey themselves. But while early humans navigated this complex ecosystem, there was also a deep psychological impact to living in such a dangerous world. Every rustle in the bushes, every distant roar, would have kept early humans alert, sharp, and constantly aware of their surroundings. This heightened sense of awareness likely led to an evolution of social behaviors and communication strategies within early human groups. Sharing information, warning each other about the presence of predators, and learning from the behaviors of animals would have been vital for survival. Early humans likely had to rely heavily on their social bonds and cooperative behaviors to overcome the threats posed by these massive creatures. The psychological toll of living in a world full of such terrifying creatures likely shaped early human culture, as well. Myths, stories, and rituals may have evolved as ways to explain the dangers they faced and to create a sense of control over the unknown. Early humans would have created stories about the giant beasts that roamed the earth, turning them into gods, monsters, or ancestors that represented both power and danger. These myths would have helped early humans process their fears, giving them a sense of agency over the terrifying world around them. Ultimately, while early humans didn't coexist with dinosaurs in the direct, physical sense we imagine today, their world was full of massive, intimidating creatures that shaped how they survived, socialized, and understood the forces of nature. The constant danger from predators, the need for adaptation, and the relationship with the environment forged a unique bond between humans and the world they lived in. It was a world of giants, and early humans had to learn how to live in the shadows of these towering creatures, constantly adapting and evolving in the face of danger. As early humans lived in a world dominated by the presence of massive creatures, their relationship with the environment grew even more complex. This wasn't just a time of survival, it was a time of learning, adaptation, and innovation. The constant presence of dinosaurs, or more accurately, large prehistoric animals, forced humans to develop strategies that would help them cohabit with these formidable creatures, even if they never directly coexisted with the dinosaurs themselves. But the presence of large herbivores and carnivores alike shaped everything, from where humans built their shelters to how they hunted, gathered, and interacted with their environment. For example, imagine you're out gathering plants with your tribe, and you're suddenly aware of a rumbling in the distance. You know this sound all too well, the heavy thud of a large, herbivorous dinosaur moving through the landscape. Your heart races as you realize that, while the creature isn't directly threatening you, it could easily trample over your group if you're not careful. You quickly signal to your tribe, and the group shifts to another area, seeking safety. You probably won't survive this if you aren't paying attention to every movement and sound in your environment. The ability to read the landscape, understand animal behavior, and anticipate movements would have been essential skills for survival. It's not just about knowing where the predators are, it's about knowing where the big herbivores will go next, too. Historians still debate how much early humans and these massive creatures interacted. Some suggest that humans didn't come into contact with dinosaurs directly due to the millions of years that separated them. But, looking at the evidence of large animals from the same time period, we can speculate that early humans did live alongside creatures that were as formidable as dinosaurs in their size and threat. This dynamic created a world where humans were forced to adapt constantly, tracking animals, observing patterns, and knowing when to hide or approach. These early encounters weren't just about avoiding being crushed by giant creatures, they were also about learning how to make the most of the resources that these creatures provided. The bones, meat, and hides from these giant animals were invaluable. Early humans didn't waste any part of their prey. The bones could be turned into tools or weapons, the meat could be cooked and preserved, and the skins could be made into clothing or shelter coverings. But even with all this, there was a constant struggle to balance the risks and rewards of living so close to these massive creatures. The environment was unforgiving, and the resources that kept early humans alive were constantly in competition with the creatures that shared their world. And that competition wasn't just physical, it was about space, territory, and access to food. Humans may have been opportunistic hunters, but they had to respect the larger animals around them. Imagine having to stake out an area for gathering food, only to find that a large herbivore has decided to graze the very plants you were planning to harvest. The balance of these ecosystems was delicate, and it required humans to be adaptable in how they lived, what they ate, and where they went. Over time, humans would learn not only how to avoid certain dangers but also how to coexist with the creatures that shared the landscape. One crucial way early humans might have coped with this complex world was by developing cooperative survival strategies. In a world so dangerous, it wasn't enough for a group to be good hunters. They had to work together, communicate effectively, and share resources. The social structure of early humans likely revolved around shared responsibilities: those who could track and hunt large game, those who could gather plants, those who kept watch for predators, and those who cared for the sick and the elderly. Cooperation wasn't just a way to survive, it was a necessity. With predators like large carnivores prowling the land and massive herbivores moving through, the safety of the group depended on everyone playing their part. Historians still argue whether early human social structures were as formalized as they would later become or if they remained loosely organized. What is clear is that survival demanded a high level of social cohesion. The success of a hunting trip, for example, didn't just depend on the strength of the hunters, it relied on the cooperation of the entire tribe. From gathering the necessary tools and weapons to preparing the food afterward, every task was part of a larger effort to ensure that everyone survived. Fire, as we've discussed, was central to this communal life, but so was the sharing of food, the passing down of knowledge, and the deep understanding of the ecosystem they lived in. For early humans, every day in this world of giant creatures wasn't just about surviving the next hunt, it was about learning how to live in a world constantly shaped by forces beyond their control. They were learning how to read the signs of nature, how to predict animal behavior, and how to create social structures that supported collective survival. The presence of dinosaurs and other massive creatures in their world taught early humans to be keen observers, adaptive thinkers, and highly social beings. In some ways, the presence of these creatures shaped the very development of human society. The need to cooperate, the necessity of strategy, and the understanding of territoriality and resource management were lessons that early humans learned through their struggles in this hostile, unpredictable world. Though they didn't always directly interact with these massive creatures, early humans adapted in ways that allowed them to survive, and eventually thrive, by using every resource at their disposal. As early humans continued to adapt to their environment, they began to realize that the presence of giant creatures wasn't just a source of danger, it was also a critical part of their ecosystem. The massive dinosaurs, predators, and herbivores were not only obstacles to survival, they also shaped the world in ways that early humans had to navigate. By learning to track the movements of these creatures, early humans could anticipate where to hunt, when to gather, and where to find safety. The landscape, with its predators and prey, was a complex web that required humans to understand how everything connected, and this knowledge was key to survival. Imagine you're an early human in this world, your senses constantly on high alert. You know that survival depends on understanding the rhythms of nature, the migration of the large herbivores, the movements of the carnivores. Every day, you observe the environment, learning where the water holes are, where the safest shelter is, and how the creatures move through the land. This wasn't just instinct, it was a finely honed skill that took years to master. Early humans were keen observers, and their survival was deeply tied to this knowledge. They didn't just live in their environment, they understood it, adapted to it, and worked within it. But the presence of dinosaurs, particularly large carnivores, also meant that early humans had to be even more cautious about where they traveled and when. The constant threat of predation created a daily tension in early human life. Hunting wasn't just about bringing home food, it was about avoiding being hunted yourself. Larger carnivores, such as big cats and early reptiles, would have been major threats, and early humans likely had to use their wits and social cooperation to avoid becoming prey. The hunting strategies they developed were not just for catching food, they were for ensuring their own safety. Historians still debate how much early Homo sapiens interacted with these large predators. Some suggest that early humans, like modern-day primates, had the ability to avoid direct confrontation with dangerous animals, while others believe that hunting and scavenging were much more hazardous activities, leading to regular confrontations with larger creatures. Regardless of how often these encounters took place, it's clear that early humans were forced to develop tactics to mitigate the risks. One important tactic would have been to hunt in groups, using communication and cooperation to track and bring down prey while also keeping an eye out for predators. The use of weapons, rudimentary spears, clubs, and tools, was essential for defending themselves against these threats. The fact that early humans could work together to hunt large game, defend against predators, and maintain the safety of their groups demonstrates how far human intelligence and cooperation had come. Early human societies were beginning to form around these cooperative behaviors. Fire, once a source of warmth and protection, became central to group life. With fire, early humans were able to cook food, stay warm during cold nights, and ward off larger predators. Fire, in many ways, became a form of security, no longer just something to warm you on a chilly evening, but a tool that kept the darkness at bay, a barrier between you and the predatory world outside. But even with fire and weapons, early humans still faced an environment that was often unforgiving. Every day, they had to balance risk with reward, hunting when necessary, but also retreating when danger was too great. This constant push and pull between action and caution is what defined life in the prehistoric world. Early humans didn't have the luxury of waiting for ideal conditions or easy prey. Survival depended on constantly assessing the environment and being prepared for whatever came next. The presence of giant creatures in the landscape wasn't just a physical challenge, it was a mental and social one as well. It required humans to be in tune with the natural world and with each other. Every hunt, every foraging trip, and every move they made was shaped by the need to avoid danger, make the best use of their resources, and protect their communities. Early humans' ability to thrive alongside such dangerous creatures was as much about mental adaptability as it was about physical survival. They needed to think strategically about where to hunt, when to rest, and how to manage their resources. What's fascinating about early human life in a world of dinosaurs, and other massive creatures, is that their survival wasn't just about outmuscling or outrunning predators. It was about adaptation, cooperation, and utilizing what they had to the fullest. As the environment shifted, so did the challenges. Early humans didn't just survive by hunting large game, they survived by understanding their ecosystem, by recognizing patterns in nature, and by adapting their behavior in response to the world around them. Their ability to live alongside giants was a testament to the resilience of the human species and the intricate relationships early humans formed with the world around them. As time went on, the balance between humans and their environment shifted. The threats posed by large predators didn't disappear, but humans learned to adapt, create stronger tools, and work together in increasingly sophisticated ways. What started as a daily struggle for survival became a larger journey of innovation, leadership, and societal growth. Humans didn't just adapt to the presence of dinosaurs, they learned to live in a world defined by both their own resourcefulness and the creatures that shared the planet with them. As early humans adapted to the shifting environment, the landscape around them continued to evolve. The dinosaurs and massive creatures that once roamed the earth slowly gave way to new species, and with that, early humans had to adjust not only to their changing food sources but also to a new set of environmental challenges. The presence of such colossal creatures was no longer the most pressing concern. Instead, the challenges of a warmer world brought new opportunities, but also new dangers. Early humans, once surviving alongside gigantic creatures, now had to navigate a rapidly changing ecosystem that introduced a variety of new threats and resource distributions. Imagine the moment you step outside your shelter, your breath misting in the air, and notice that the giant herds of herbivores aren't as plentiful anymore. The once abundant land of giant animals is now filled with smaller, faster creatures that are harder to hunt. The cold, vast world of the Ice Age is fading away, and with it, the steady supply of large prey. These changes brought a mix of uncertainty and opportunity. For early humans, survival didn't just mean adapting to different creatures, it meant adapting to a new rhythm of life. You probably won't survive this if you don't learn to adapt quickly, not just to the animals you encounter but to the changing weather, food availability, and the new dynamics of the environment. Historians argue whether early humans fully understood the environmental shifts they were facing. Some believe that humans only gradually began to realize the extent of the changing climate, while others argue that the shift in climate and environment was too abrupt for them to have an understanding of its broader implications. What is clear, however, is that early humans didn't just rely on hunting as they once did, they also turned to a more varied diet that involved gathering and foraging for plants. As large mammals disappeared, smaller creatures and plants became increasingly important to early human survival. But even with this shift, the challenges remained. These weren't just different kinds of animals, these were creatures that required new skills and techniques to hunt, and often they were less predictable than the slow-moving megafauna. The need to adapt also pushed early humans to create more efficient and effective tools. While their early weapons had been simple, stone spears, bone knives, the evolving environment required more advanced tools for both hunting and gathering. The hunting strategies that had been effective in the Ice Age no longer worked in the same way. For instance, animals like woolly mammoths were not only dwindling but also harder to track in a landscape filled with forests, mountains, and rivers. Early humans, therefore, had to develop new tactics for hunting, such as smaller, more agile spears, traps, and perhaps even early forms of domestication. As early humans moved away from a pure carnivorous diet, they began to adapt their diet to include plants more than before. Historians are still divided on just how much of early human diets were based on plant-based food compared to meat. Some evidence suggests that early humans began to rely more heavily on plants, especially during warmer months when hunting was less successful. This meant that women, already responsible for much of the foraging and gathering, became even more central to survival. Their knowledge of the land and its plant life would have been essential in ensuring the tribe had enough food, especially when hunting wasn't an option. However, the process of foraging wasn't always simple. Some plants were dangerous, some difficult to identify, and the variety of edible plants was limited compared to the abundance of animal-based resources. This was also a time of significant experimentation. The warming climate meant that plants that had never been available in colder climates began to thrive. Early humans would have learned which plants were safe to eat, which provided the most nourishment, and which could be used for medicinal purposes. Women, as the primary gatherers, became the keepers of this knowledge, shaping the tribe's understanding of the world. Their knowledge of plants and herbs wasn't just essential for food, it was vital for survival in the face of injuries, sickness, or disease. At the same time, the environmental changes introduced new predators. As large, ancient creatures like the saber-toothed tiger faded into history, new species took their place. These weren't necessarily bigger creatures, but they were fast, efficient predators, and they had adapted to the warmer climates. For early humans, this meant constant vigilance. The same skills they had honed during the Ice Age, tracking, hunting, and avoiding danger, had to be redefined for a new set of challenges. Not only were they adapting to new animals, but they also had to find new ways to protect themselves from threats that were no longer just about brute strength, they were about agility, cunning, and speed. In this ever-evolving world, early humans proved resilient. They didn't just survive, they thrived by adapting quickly to the shifts in their environment. This adaptability wasn't just about physical survival, but mental flexibility as well. They learned to cooperate, to innovate, and to work together to solve problems. The presence of giant creatures, which once posed a terrifying and constant danger, was eventually replaced by a new world of smaller, more agile predators. But instead of succumbing to these dangers, early humans learned to work with their environment, creating new methods of hunting, gathering, and defense. The legacy of this adaptability and resilience was carried forward by future generations. By the time Homo sapiens became the dominant species on the planet, the skills, social structures, and survival tactics developed by early humans had evolved into something much more sophisticated. But the lessons learned from the dinosaurs and the giant creatures of the past were the foundation for human survival and success in an ever-changing world. As early humans continued to adapt and survive in a world of constant change, their understanding of the environment around them grew more sophisticated. No longer just reactive to the threats posed by dinosaurs and other giant creatures, early humans began to anticipate and manipulate their environment in increasingly innovative ways. This wasn't just about learning how to track prey or avoid predators anymore, it was about shaping the landscape to suit their needs. The new world they inhabited, shaped by both the end of the Ice Age and the disappearance of large megafauna, was a place where early humans began to leave their mark, not just through survival, but through more strategic engagement with the land. With the extinction of many of the great creatures that once roamed the earth, early humans saw the landscape shift once again. No longer dominated by the giants of the past, the ecosystems around them were filled with new challenges and opportunities. Smaller prey replaced larger herbivores, but these animals were quicker and more elusive, requiring a different set of hunting tactics. Early humans learned to adapt by developing new weapons and hunting techniques. Spears became lighter and more specialized, traps more intricate, and tools more efficient. The need for cooperation in hunting also grew. Now, more than ever, humans had to work together in tight-knit groups to outsmart their prey and avoid becoming prey themselves. In the absence of large game, early humans also turned to the land itself for sustenance. They began to understand the cyclical nature of the seasons and the plants that grew in abundance at different times of the year. While their hunting skills remained vital, their ability to forage and gather was just as crucial. Early humans began to recognize that certain plants could be relied upon during lean times, and their knowledge of edible vegetation became more specialized. In addition to their role as gatherers, women in particular likely played a central role in this knowledge exchange, ensuring the group's survival through the understanding of the natural world around them. Yet, as much as early humans learned to adapt, their survival was never guaranteed. The world was still full of dangers, both from the environment and from the animals that shared it. Smaller predators, like packs of wild dogs or aggressive felines, became more prominent in the ecosystem. These new threats pushed humans to refine their defensive tactics and social structures. What once may have been an isolated incident of a lone human being attacked by a predator now evolved into the necessity for group protection. Early humans, ever adaptable, began to form more complex systems of defense, utilizing their surroundings to create natural barriers, developing sharper tools for self-defense, and working together to keep each other safe. Historians still debate whether early humans were more defensive in their approach to predators or whether they took an offensive stance. Some scholars believe that early humans, aware of the dangers posed by larger predators, focused more on avoidance and retreat, while others argue that early humans took the fight to their predators, using fire, tools, and cooperative strategies to challenge them head-on. What's clear, however, is that early humans were masters of adaptation. Whether through cooperative defense, enhanced weaponry, or the clever use of the environment, they found ways to live alongside the very creatures that threatened their existence. One fascinating aspect of this adaptation was the early use of fire. Early humans, as we know, discovered fire as an essential survival tool, but its importance went beyond cooking food and staying warm. Fire was an effective tool for protecting against predators, lighting the night, and ensuring that the group could remain safe from dangers lurking in the dark. Imagine the sense of security you'd feel huddling around a fire, knowing that the predators of the night were kept at bay by the flickering flames. Fire wasn't just a luxury, it was a strategic tool that allowed early humans to defend themselves, stay warm, and create a sense of community. With fire, early humans could fend off smaller predators, mark their territory, and create a sense of unity among their group. This reliance on fire also contributed to early human social structures. As fire became central to daily life, it became a gathering point for the tribe. People gathered around the fire to share food, tell stories, and bond. The fire wasn't just a physical tool, it was the social hub of the group, the place where relationships were forged and cultural practices were passed down. The first communities weren't just held together by their need for survival, they were bonded by the warmth of the fire and the sense of security it provided. As fire became a central part of human life, it also helped early humans cope with the emotional and psychological stress of living in a dangerous world. The uncertainty of the natural world, with its ever-present threats, could be overwhelming. But around the fire, there was comfort, camaraderie, and a sense of continuity. Early humans began to rely on the fire not just for warmth, but for emotional stability. This emotional aspect of fire, alongside its practical uses, made it a symbol of life, death, and survival, an enduring link between humans and the forces of nature that shaped their existence. While the world may have been full of dangers and challenges, early humans learned to navigate it through their ingenuity, adaptability, and cooperation. The presence of giant creatures, predators, and changing landscapes didn't overwhelm them, they used these challenges to propel themselves forward. They learned from the world around them, adapting their behaviors, tools, and strategies to the ever-changing environment. And in doing so, they laid the foundation for future human societies that would continue to evolve and thrive. As early humans continued to adapt, their relationship with the changing world around them deepened in complexity. No longer were they simply reacting to the dangers presented by giant predators or the challenges of gathering food in a hostile landscape. Humans were becoming active participants in shaping the environment around them, learning to manipulate the land and its resources in ways that would allow them not only to survive but to thrive. This shift from passive survival to active engagement with the world marked a significant change in early human history. For instance, with the changing landscape came the need for new shelter-building techniques. Early humans had likely been using natural formations like caves or makeshift shelters made from animal hides and branches, but as their social structures became more permanent, so too did their need for more lasting shelters. Humans began to experiment with new materials, like wood, stone, and later, clay, to build more robust and reliable shelters. This wasn't just about creating a roof over their heads, it was about taking control of their environment in a way they hadn't before. The act of building something permanent marked the beginning of humanity's architectural journey, where survival evolved into creating a home. Historians still debate when exactly this shift occurred. Some suggest that humans were still predominantly nomadic and that the rise of permanent shelters and settlements came much later in human history. Others argue that early humans may have started to experiment with more permanent structures sooner, especially as the Ice Age ended and the climate began to shift. What's clear, however, is that humans didn't just accept their environment, they actively shaped it, using tools and knowledge to build something more stable and lasting. This transition was essential for laying the groundwork for more complex societies, where the need for defense, resource management, and social organization would only grow. But while the ability to build shelters marked a significant leap in human development, it also brought its own set of challenges. The very act of settling down in one place meant that humans now had to deal with issues they had previously avoided. With more permanent shelters came the need for greater cooperation, division of labor, and social structures. Early humans had to figure out how to share resources, manage food, and ensure that everyone had a role in the tribe. No longer could individuals simply wander the landscape hunting and gathering, they had to stay together and rely on each other to make the group stronger and more resilient. As communities grew larger, the social dynamics of early human life became more complex. The need for leadership, organization, and cooperation became increasingly apparent. Early humans, with their growing sense of community, likely began to form alliances and develop systems for decision-making and conflict resolution. Leaders didn't just emerge based on physical strength anymore, they were individuals who could organize the group, allocate resources, and ensure that everyone worked together toward a common goal. This emergence of leadership was a direct result of the challenges posed by the changing environment and the need to adapt to the increasing complexity of social life. One of the most fascinating aspects of this period is how humans began to approach the concept of territory. While earlier, nomadic humans might have moved freely across the landscape, the rise of permanent shelters and settlements meant that people had to establish boundaries. As fire, food, and shelter became more tied to specific locations, early humans likely began to mark their territories and defend them. This wasn't just about survival, it was about securing the group's resources and ensuring that they had control over their environment. These early territorial disputes were the precursors to the more formalized forms of conflict that would eventually evolve into organized warfare. In addition to territorial concerns, humans also had to grapple with the psychological and emotional impact of their new environment. The safety of their settlements and the warmth of their shelters offered protection from the dangers of the outside world, but it also brought new forms of anxiety. The constant presence of threats, whether from predators, rival groups, or even the uncertainty of resources, meant that early humans had to balance the desire for security with the fear of loss. This fear, while primal, likely pushed early humans to become more strategic, more organized, and more collaborative in their efforts to survive. But despite these challenges, early humans thrived. They adapted, learned, and grew stronger as a species. The very fact that they were able to build shelters, create social structures, and develop new strategies for survival in a changing world is a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. The lessons learned in this period, about cooperation, leadership, resource management, and the manipulation of the environment, set the stage for the development of more complex societies and civilizations in the future. These first steps in the evolution of human society were fueled by the same drive for survival that had always motivated our ancestors. But as humans adapted, they didn't just survive, they learned to shape their world, building shelters, forging social bonds, and developing the tools and strategies needed to thrive. And, as we will see, the role of fire and other resources only became more important in the story of humanity's progress, laying the foundation for future advancements and challenges. As early human societies transitioned from the harsh, unpredictable conditions of the Ice Age into a more stable, tempered world, the evolving relationship with their environment continued to shape their survival strategies. With the development of more permanent shelters and settled communities, early humans now faced the challenge of adapting to new, unpredictable circumstances, changing climates, resource availability, and the ever-present need for food and shelter. But it wasn't just the physical demands of survival that early humans had to contend with, there was also the emotional toll of living in a world where safety and security were never guaranteed. For early humans, the need to work together and cooperate became more important than ever. With larger communities came the complexity of managing resources, sharing responsibilities, and resolving disputes. The development of social bonds and leadership structures grew alongside the physical advancements in shelter building. Early humans didn't just need a strong physical shelter, they needed strong social structures to hold their communities together. And those social structures were just as vital to survival as fire, food, and water. In fact, one of the biggest challenges early humans faced was balancing cooperation with the occasional need for conflict. As the environment changed and groups began to settle in specific territories, disputes over resources, whether food, fire, or land, became inevitable. The notion of territoriality, once loosely defined in nomadic groups, now took on a new level of importance. As groups became more dependent on their settlements, the need to defend these territories became a central issue. Early humans began to organize themselves not just for the survival of the individual or small family groups, but for the survival of the entire tribe. The ability to defend one's home from both natural and human threats was an essential skill that would define the future of human conflict. One of the key developments that allowed for greater cooperation and social order was the emergence of leadership roles. As communities grew in size, the need for organization became more pressing. Leaders were often those who could maintain resources like fire, water, and food, and also protect the group from external threats. However, these early leaders were not always the strongest physically. They were often individuals who could bring people together, manage resources efficiently, and maintain social stability. This shift in leadership was a significant moment in human history. The ability to maintain peace and cooperation within growing communities laid the groundwork for more complex forms of governance in later societies. But not every challenge early humans faced was about conflict or resources. The changing environment also presented new opportunities for growth and innovation. As the climate warmed and the landscape changed, early humans began to experiment with new ways of interacting with their surroundings. They learned how to work with the land, discovering how to plant and harvest crops, how to domesticate animals, and how to store food for the future. These innovations would set the stage for the development of agriculture and the eventual rise of permanent settlements and civilizations. The role of women in these early communities was central to the survival and progress of the group. While men were out hunting and defending the territory, women managed the day-to-day survival tasks, gathering food, maintaining shelters, and ensuring the well-being of the children and elderly. Their knowledge of plants, their ability to process food, and their role in creating and maintaining the social fabric of the community were crucial. In many ways, women were the unsung heroes of early human life, making sure that the tribe had enough to eat and that the group stayed united during difficult times. They were the ones who made sure that the group remained strong enough to face the challenges of the changing world. But even with all these advances, the future of humanity wasn't guaranteed. The challenges that early humans faced, territorial disputes, the harsh environment, and the need for cooperation, were only the beginning. As groups grew more complex and societies began to form, the dynamics of survival would shift. Leadership structures would become more formalized, the need for organization would grow, and conflict would become a constant factor in human life. But through it all, the resilience and adaptability of early humans, driven by the need for survival, cooperation, and social cohesion, would continue to push humanity forward. The ultimate lesson from this period in human history is that survival isn't just about physical strength, it's about adaptability, cooperation, and learning to navigate a world that is constantly changing. As humans moved from hunter-gatherer societies to more permanent settlements, they learned that their greatest strength was in their ability to adapt, cooperate, and build systems that supported the survival of the group. And the tools, knowledge, and strategies they developed during this time would continue to shape the course of human history for millennia. As we move forward, we can see that the struggle for survival, both physical and social, was what defined early human life. The adaptation to a changing environment, the development of leadership, and the balance of cooperation and conflict set the stage for the civilizations that followed. From this simple, survival-driven beginning, humanity would go on to build complex societies, develop technology, and explore the mysteries of the world. But it all began with the fight for survival, around fire, in shelter, and within communities, and the lessons learned during this time would continue to resonate throughout history.